Hello and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Remote Learning Insights, How Large School Districts Are Making It Happen. My name is Chris Hobson, and I am the Custom Content Manager for eSchool News. And I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's webinar is sponsored by Epson. Epson, the #1 selling projector brand worldwide, creates innovative projection technologies for business, education, and the home. Incorporating industry-leading 3 LCD technology, Epson offers a complete line of interactive, ultra-portable, and installation projectors designed to deliver quality, reliability, and cost-effective performance. Epson laser displays come from a company that's been a trusted education partner for over 25 years, with over 10 million students learning on Epson displays every day. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to go over some features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end of the presentation from our panelists to address questions. Also, there is a group chat function that you can launch by clicking on chat. Feel free to use this feature to contact somebody from the eSchool News team if you have a technical question, but please don't use this feature to ask questions of our speakers. If you have a question for a speaker, you can use the Q&A box that I just mentioned. With these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started with our presentation. Today's discussion will be led by Jason Meyer. Jason Meyer has worked for Epson America Incorporated since 2008. In his current role as Group Product Manager for Commercial Projectors, Jason's team manages Epson's educational and meeting room projector product lines for North America. Prior to joining Epson, he worked at Belkin International for 11 years. Jason, welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to everybody for attending. As school districts around the country moved to remote learning, many struggled with doing what is best for students. The goal of this webinar is to provide insights and lessons on how 2 large districts transition to remote learning. We're fortunate to be joined today by 2 leading K-12 administrators who worked hard to help their districts adjust to the new normal of students learning from home. We welcome Mark Hess, Executive Manager of Instruction Technology and Data Analysis for Walled Lake Consolidated Schools in Walled Lake, Michigan, a district of almost 14,000 students, and Dan Warren, Director of Technology Operations for Des Moines Public Schools in Des Moines, Iowa, a district with 32,000 students. We're looking forward to sharing their district's movement to online learning. With that, I'd like to introduce Marc and Dan. Mark Hess is Executive Manager of Instruction Technology and Data Analysis for Walled Lake Consolidated Schools in Walled Lake, Michigan. He served in a variety of roles since he was hired in 1993, including Executive Director of Instruction, Technology and Assessment, Director of Technology and Data Analysis, Middle School Principal, Assistant Principal, Middle School Teacher, and Elementary Teacher. He was a key leader when the district started a 1-to-1 laptop program, became a BYOD district, and changed its instructional model by joining their curriculum and technology departments to form one cohesive unit with one integrated plan. Dan Warren has been with Des Moines Public Schools for more than 20 years. He started in 2000 as a network specialist and has been Director of Technology Operations since 2010. He leads the department, providing service and support to more than 70 buildings. The department provides secure, reliable, and integrated technology solutions that align with its academic and administrative goals and collaborates to provide leadership and planning for the effective and strategic use of emerging technologies. Mark, Dan, thanks for being here today.
Good to be here. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, good seeing you guys. So as we get started here, I have a question for you both. Could you both tell us a little about your districts prior to when school facilities closed? What initiatives were you focused on? What did the technology makeup of your districts look like?
Dan, go ahead.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, like Jason said, we're a district of about 30,000 students, about 70 buildings, pre-K through 12. Before the pandemic hit, we had, was working really, really hard on a robust infrastructure. That was one thing that I knew that I had to have in place no matter what happened, that the infrastructure had to be solid, secure, and robust. So we started working on that about 10, 12 years ago. In the last 5, 7 years, we've been really working hard on our wireless infrastructure. In fact, our wireless infrastructure today is probably more robust. Well, it is more robust than our wired.
Yeah.
We also partnered with Epson too. It's been about 7 years ago, and we have installed an Epson video projector in every classroom. And which I'm glad we did that because that prepared us for today as we look at bringing kids back maybe in the fall. That we looked at all instructional spaces as a classroom with a video projector. So.
Great.
So in Walled Lake, thank you, Jason. Like most districts, our initiatives have centered around STEM, instructional technology. Like Dan had mentioned, the first priority is to build that infrastructure. In 2014, our district passed a significant bond where we were able to put ultra short throw projectors in every classroom, document cameras in every classroom, upgraded our wireless and our wired network, upgraded our cabling, our core switches. So the infrastructure, the backbone was in place, and really trying to dig deeper into meaningful instructional technology, taking technology and putting it in the pedagogy of what is modern teaching and learning. The personalized instruction, the flipped classroom, flipping the lessons, putting content available online for parents and students to access. We are a BYOD district. We are device agnostic. So as long as you have a device that connects to the internet, whether it be a tablet, a PC, an Android-based or Apple, that's what we want. And between our BYOD devices and our district purchase devices, we're a one-to-one district. And then March 13th rolls around and we close.
Yeah. Yeah, and so are you BYOD from K through 12?
We are.
Wow.
We recently celebrated our 20th anniversary. Our first one-to-one program began in 1999. We called it Anytime, Anywhere Learning. It was a middle school. We started in grade 6, 7, and 8. The students brought their own laptops. We clustered them in teams. That morphed into, in 2010, we became full BYOD, K-12, and any device.
Yeah.
Once we had upgraded our access to wireless access points and had a good infrastructure, we just went with Chromebook carts to supplement those students that do not have devices.
Yeah, we're really focused on, as you know, we're really focused on wireless connectivity and things like that, right? Things that require good network, infrastructure capabilities. I often tell people that aren't in the education industry, people don't understand how important that network backbone is to you guys, right? I mean, for when I'm talking to whether it's engineers or even network, infrastructure experts outside of the out of education industry, the thing that most people don't understand is that your requirements for your network are more robust than most enterprises, right?
Sure.
So even a large corporation, you don't have, 5,000 people all logging on to the internet simultaneously at 8 o'clock in the morning, right?
Well,
So
you
that's
think
that's a huge challenge.
It is. You think about like a high school or middle school classroom, 30 kids. Most of those students, if not all, are going to have a smartphone, which is connecting to the access point. The teacher has a smartphone. Plus, in our district, like many districts, there's multiple devices. The teacher might have their laptop and their iPad open at the same time. We also have the projector that you could connect to wirelessly.
Yep.
So you have lots of technology converging on an access point.
Yeah.
And so it has to be robust.
Yeah.
And
Dan, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say, it's almost like a small city. I remember not too long ago, I sat in front of a group of building principals, and we were talking about wireless. And that time we were planning a pretty significant wireless infrastructure upgrade. And I just asked them to raise their hand, you know, how many people have a device in here now? How many have a phone? You know, how many have something that is connected to the wireless? And out of them 30 principals in that meeting, I think we had 84 devices connected.
Yeah.
So just out of that one room. So yeah.
It's almost 3 times the number of people, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so Mark, a question for you. How did your focus on personalized learning help you transition to remote learning?
Sure. So with remote learning, as a learning organization, as a school, as a district, you lose control, right? At least when the students are in brick and mortar, you have control of what's the time structure. Okay, they're going to this subject. You know, this is the hour they receive social studies instruction or geometry or literacy instruction. You have a lot more control of the content. The teachers are planning with their grade level or content area teams. The curriculum department, we're overseeing what is being taught in terms of these are our units of study. And so I know that on, you know, the second week of March, our 7th grade math teachers and students should be in this sequence of our curriculum. When you switch to the virtual, you lose a lot of that control. So what's constant is the content. We still have the content. So how are we going to deliver that in a way that makes the most sense so it's accessible to all students, and all means all. You know, those were some big heavy lifts that we had to, in all districts, when we switched to virtual learning. How do we make sure the supports, not only the academic supports, but the social emotional supports are there for those youngsters that traditionally receive those supports in a brick and mortar school? I think for us is our curriculum was defined enough to allow the teachers that that kind of gravity, you know, the control that the teacher had over here's the curriculum, here's the students, I know their needs. It helps to be rich with data. So we had good data points through our diagnostic testing, our formative assessments. So teachers use that data to take the content and help deliver it to the students and to the families in a way that could best meet their needs. And you know, teachers, from what I hear, from what I see on social media all over the US, we're doing just yeoman's work and reaching those families. You know, just trying to make sure the content, and you're never going to capture the learning as you would if you were in school. Okay, you just can't replace a quality teacher in the classroom with the students. But if you can maintain that level of connection, you know, we found that the students, the parents, and the teachers were just working collaboratively, going back and forth using the technology. Teachers were flexible. You know, one size does not fit all, and that's a mentality that carried over from traditional school into the virtual environment.
Yeah, I can imagine it's tremendously challenging, right, for the teachers. I know it's challenging for the students. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and it's been challenging for her just because she likes being in class, right? She likes the personal interaction with the teacher, but I know that teachers are struggling too. It's got to be tremendously difficult, and they're probably working harder than ever at home than you know, as opposed to the classroom, right? It can't be easy.
Well, I think, Jason, too, is one of the things that we found out early on, and I wish we underscored this. I wish we would have shined a spotlight on it earlier, is that our staff, our teachers, many of them, and this is true everywhere, they're also homeschooling their own children.
Yeah.
So you have teachers, principals, other administrators, paraeducators. Not only are they trying to fulfill an obligation to teach their class and do it at high levels, but many of them have, kids, their own children trying to, and you're also working at home, and those that have spouses or significant others, all trying to compete for wireless at home, right? Not many homes are as robust as our schools are, and devices. And so we have to pay attention to that. We talk about the social emotional needs of the kids, but we also have to honor and respect those social emotional needs of the adults.
Absolutely.
And strategize to how do we support, how do we acknowledge, how do we provide some strategies for our staff who are delivering content online at home for them to decompress. And, when we're in the school, we can always walk across the hall and talk to a colleague, sit down, vent, whatever it is, strategize, problem solve. Virtually, it's great, but it does create a little bit of that barrier that we wouldn't have if we were in person.
Yeah.
Along with that, I would share too, sometimes, well, in our district, most of the time, the only meal that kid may get may be at school. And so we have a food service director who jumped on board, and I mean, she just reported this morning, by the end of this week, we served 1 million meals since the beginning.
Wow, that's awesome.
So,
that's crazy.
Bravo.
Yeah, absolutely. So question for you, Dan. I understand you opened a virtual school last year. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And then can you tell us a little bit, how did this help you transition to remote learning?
Oh, it helped significantly. We didn't have to recreate the wheel. We had like you said, we previously opened up a virtual school for grades 9 through 12. We had a lot of our tools already standardized. We had it figured out. We had a lot of content that was already built. In fact, we were just accredited as a school with the Department of Ed in Iowa, one of very few in the state. So we didn't have to worry about that. We centralized our learning management system ahead of time, which really helped. The second thing would be a centralized collaboration communication tool. We had to standardize on a platform. So Des Moines chose Microsoft Teams. And we've been trying to push that out for a couple of years now. And I'm not saying it's been challenging, but not everybody accepted that. And when we closed, it was actually April 8th, we made the decision not to return. That forced a lot of us to start using Teams and getting used to that. So now, I mean, our Teams usage has went up over 400% since all this has happened.
Yeah.
In fact, that's all I do all day long is sit in Teams meetings, basically.
Right.
But it really did help to have that virtual school in place. We started out with 40 kids, went to 200, went to 400. This next year, we're at 600.
Wow.
And then working on a return to learn plan for the fall, we're going to offer that to families for next fall too. So that number could significantly increase.
So before we went to remote learning, when all of this started happening, who were the students in your virtual school? Were these rural students or students that weren't close to a physical school, or how did that work?
Well, I would say all of the above. We had some students that had a full caseload of workload in a brick and mortar building who wanted to do something above and beyond. So they enrolled in classes. We also had some students from outside the metro, in the metro outside of our district, enroll in some classes. It might not be a full schedule, but it might be 1 or 2 classes here and there. We also have some circumstances for one reason or another where a kid could not be in school.
Sure.
And we've enrolled those kids into the virtual academy also. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit of everything. I mean, some kids just do better virtually. And like I said, the numbers are increasing. We've got data that they're doing very well. And the
That's
one thing
great.
that we wanted to make sure that we had the content that was, you know, we looked at a lot of a canned curriculum, you know, and decided that we were better off hiring our own content creators and having our own teachers do that. And it's worked out really, really well. We're up to over 250 courses online now. So
Wow, that's
yeah.
great. So Mark, tell us about developing your continuity of learning plan. What were some of the biggest challenges to overcome, and what do you think is working really well?
Sure. So in Michigan, the schools closed. It was Friday the 13th. It was March 13th. We got word from the governor that that Friday was our last day with students. What our district decided to do was waste little time in switching to a virtual platform. We knew that at the very least, we needed teachers to connect to students, even that first couple weeks, just for that social emotional continuity of checking in, maybe reading a story to our younger grades, a math problem for the day. We knew that the meat and the potatoes of the curriculum, we could hit the pause button on for a couple weeks, allow our team to meet and develop very strategic sequences of lesson content delivery. But at the very least, that first 2 weeks, we wanted our teachers to have some type of a virtual connection with the students. And it could be synchronous or asynchronous, but we distributed for families that did not have access to a device. We distributed over 1,600 Chromebooks, so students could have a Chromebook at home. And as far as our learning management system, in the district, we had teachers using a few different learning management systems, with like Google Classroom being the most dominant one, but you know, Seesaw or Edmodo or some of the other programs out there. We said, whatever you're currently using and that your families and students are familiar with, continue to use that platform, right? And it allowed us, as our teachers are connecting with the families, just dealing with the current events, reading stories, journaling, just going through some math problems. We told our parents, our community, that we're not gonna introduce any new content right away, that we're gonna allow a couple of weeks for this to settle in, and then give our team, our curriculum team, time to really look at the rest of the school year, take a look at the power standards, and really adjust the curriculum to make the most sense to what are the power standards that we know we need our students to learn between now and the rest of the school year. And you know, it worked out well. We did not, you know, within 48 hours of learning that our schools were closing from Friday to that Monday, we were connected, and we had teachers posting welcome messages, just like they would during the school year in the classroom, like a class meeting, using a Zoom or Google Meet, and just having that connection. We wanted the kids to have a connection with their teacher, and then once our curriculum and our units of study, and we knew we had a roadmap, then we got into the instructional new content. The challenge was the all means all, you know, working with students with special needs, students on 504 plans, IEPs, really collaborating with our county ISD at the state level, as well as our own staff, making sure that we utilized all available staff from certainly our teachers, our principals, our paraeducators, really as a team coming together and just figuring it out, you know, really taking each problem and trying to solve it as best we could.
Yeah, it takes everybody, right?
It does. Yeah.
You need the whole team to pull together quickly. I was really impressed, you know, in our own school district here, just how quickly they put a plan together, because nobody saw it coming, right? So it's really impressive to see, you know, districts like your own, where you guys were able to pull together this plan in such a short amount of time to keep kids, you know, learning, and just, it's really an amazing feat, actually. I don't think you all get enough credit for what you were able to pull off in a short period of time. A lot of people A lot of people like to armchair quarterback things and think they have a better solution. But when you're faced with, tens of thousands of students having to all of a sudden start learning from home, it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
So,
And I think just being transparent, we didn't have all the answers. Like, we didn't know how we were going to handle
Right.
grading, for example, right away.
Mhm.
We knew that grading high school GPAs, particularly our juniors and seniors, trying to raise their GPA for college scholarships. We just said, and that's one example, but we didn't pretend to have all the answers right off the bat. We just continually said, we are working, we're collaborating, we set up an email address for parents to email questions. We were taking the information in, and we, just like all of you, were adjusting to,
Sure.
This is a pandemic. It's shutting down the economy, the schools. People are working from home. Everyone was affected. And we were just transparent and saying, we're doing the best we can. We don't have every I dotted and T crossed, but trust us, we have teams of people meeting. We'll figure it out. We'll get there.
I think the importance is the communication, right? Just
Yep.
open communication with the students and parents, and just letting them know that you're working on it. That goes a long way.
As we work on our plan too, the Return to Learn task force have been working for over a month now, what the fall is going to look like. And so, we surveyed all of our stakeholders, not only students and parents, but we also surveyed the staff to see, to check in on their well-being. But as we start working on our plan, we found that it was easier to we could come up with a virtual plan really quick. We had a really hard time coming up with some kind of a hybrid plan. We have limited resources. What do you have to do to keep everybody safe? The safe distancing and the mask and all the PPE equipment that you need. That was just mind-boggling. And we just put together a plan. In fact, we just presented it to our board today, and hopefully we'll get some direction on how to move forward. But we're hoping to get 90% of our kids back in the fall, and give them an option of, if they just have underlying health issues or for some reason they can't be in the buildings, we have a virtual plan also. But whatever plan they choose, we're asking them to at least give us a semester, stick with that plan for a semester so we can work it out for the rest of the year. But that plan was really tough to come up with.
It's tough. And I think there's I was looking at the guidance that came down from the California Department of Education, right? And they have sort of 4 different models, right? But I anticipate that depending on district, they may adopt, each district may adopt different models, or you may have a hybrid of a couple of different models, right? So it's going to be very interesting. So Mark, how'd your district train your teachers to become fluent in remote learning in such a short period of time? And you're weeks into it now, so what support have you found necessary to provide teachers in order to help them be successful?
Yeah, good question. What helps is a teaching staff that was already well-versed in instructional technology. We had built a pretty darn good system of training, professional learning through the years on instructional technology. Most of our lessons have instructional technology built right into the lesson, right into the unit. Being a BYOD district for a number of years and having the assets in the classroom, our teachers are very familiar with, how to use a short throw Epson projector for instructional delivery. They're accustomed to using the like an Epson high definition document camera to help deliver content. That helped, having that robust. I think we talked earlier about having a strong network backbone in place, the infrastructure. Right after that comes that professional learning. And I always articulate the difference between training and professional learning. For example, when I guess 8 years ago, when we installed short throw projectors in every classroom, of course you need to provide some training. How do I use this? How do I control it? But once that training takes place, the training is what you would learn reading a manual or going to YouTube. Once that takes place, then the significant part of that is the professional learning. How do I take my instructional content in my instructional delivery and embed it within that technology?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what our teachers have been doing, right? They just continued to do that virtually. Most of them took their document cameras home and set up a teaching station at home. We even had teachers, we still have some of the old projectors, you know, on stands,
Sure.
took them home. You know, we said no. We did have requests for the short throw projectors to go home, but they were installed. We said no to that. But we even had teachers taking, projectors home, some of the older models to use at home, using their document camera and using some of the tools within our curriculum. I just think having a strong infrastructure, a strong professional learning plan, and we've always said that instruction drives the technology, not the technology drives the instruction. Let's take a look. What are the instructional needs? What do our standards? What does the next gen science standards or the Common Core ELA and math standards? How do we take those and what type of instructional technology needs are embedded within that? So, but I will say at the end of the day, when I look at the last, 12 weeks of the school year, it really was 12 weeks of professional learning, because after a while, teachers are trying new programs, new widgets, new apps. I think we installed over 200 different Chrome apps that teachers requested. So like Dan mentioned, we surveyed our staff and it created a sense of excitement that after we got into it and our teachers started trying new technologies, new applications, it really sparked just this professional curiosity. Many, and the feedback that we hear is people just can't wait to continue to use that. Whether we're back in school, brick and mortar, hybrid, or virtually, that will continue.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah, sure.
I think we will see advances in technology come out of all of this, right? Because we're all sort of rethinking how to do things. So I know that, my team and my counterparts in Japan, our research and development people, we're all sort of, it's opened our eyes to some new challenges, right? So I think there's some good things that will come out of it. It also, I have to tell you, it warms my heart that the teachers want to bring their projectors and their document cameras home with them. It's like a teddy bear.
Yep.
The only thing I would add to that was, talk about educational reform. This is forcing it. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of good changes through this.
Well, it's doing the same thing in the corporate world, right? Like we completely, we have a completely different perspective on how people can work from home and how efficient they can be and all of that stuff, right? So it's going to change everything. Right. So Dan, question for you. I know your focus in the first few weeks was on addressing equity. Can you tell us about what your district is doing to address this and what partnerships your district's working on to address equity?
Sure. Well, the shift to online learning, it was followed by a decision when it was announced on April 8th that the students would not return to the school buildings. So instead, we quickly pivoted to an online educational content while deploying a technological infrastructure to ensure that every student and staff had equal access to connect to the coursework delivered online. And again, this change was all grade levels, pre-K through 12th grade. To achieve that equity and resume coursework for the students, the district implemented a comprehensive process that began with the district-wide surveys I talked about earlier. It turned to help determine the family's needs for computers, to see if they had access from home, just to see what that situation looked like. And so for the first 2 weeks in April, we distributed over 21,000 laptops out to students. And that was tricky in itself because here, we're telling everybody to stay home, be safe, but come to your building and get a computer. So that was kind of a mixed message. So we were able to do it all outside, had a lot of staff. They just drove up, we handed off their computers and they drove away. So they didn't have to come into the buildings at all. To fill the broadband gaps among the student families, we provided many of the families with a mobile hotspot as a temporary solution. So we had to go out and quickly procure. We didn't have enough hotspots. So we had to quickly procure as many hotspots as we could. In some cases, we couldn't get hotspots, so we worked with vendors to actually provide cell phones with, with that option, the wireless option. So we got those all out, distributed, and then we started working with our internet provider here in Des Moines, Mediacom. It's our largest ISP in the city. Started working with them. They had a Compete to Connect program. They're already established, not through the district, but just through the families' homes. So that was for $9.95 a month, they could get connectivity. So we worked with Mediacom as fast as we could. They hired extra installers. They provided all the services free of charge. We provided them the data. We went out and we were able to do some days up to 100 homes a day.
Wow.
So we're still working through that. So the district agreed to pay that $9.95 a month per family until the month of June, the end of June. And now I'm meeting with the superintendent and some others this week to determine that we probably are going to have to expand that for summer school and just other things that are happening. And then meeting with Mediacom just to see if we can, what we can do to sustain that Compete to Connect program throughout the year. So, we did that. Like I said, it's funded by the district now. We also had a lot of outreach from community partners, companies, families, they were just at our doors and ringing our phones and, how can they help? So we had a community foundation through Greater Des Moines already established. And so people, they can donate through that, and then we'll determine how to use those dollars later on, they can adopt a family, how that's going to work. We don't know yet. Again, we'll have some answers by the end of the week. But between Mediacom and the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, those are the two partners, and along with our teachers union, have really pulled together to pull this off, and we couldn't have done it without each other. So built some great relationships with some vendors very quickly.
So, I mean, knowing that there's unique challenges for urban populations, right? What advice would you give to other large urban districts?
Well, first of all, standardization, be as standard as you can. I mean, set your expectations, have them agreed upon before deploying such an environment. Lessons we learned had to do with our demographics. Know your students. Be sure you have a structure in place for families who are English language learners. I mean, that was huge, very huge in our district. Not only them, but we have a lot of homeless and transient families. So just know your demographics and have something agreed upon beforehand.
Yeah. It's a big challenge.
Yes, it was huge.
And then, so I get, this is for both of you, but as with the rest of the country, both of your districts are several weeks into remote learning now. What do you think are your biggest takeaways?
For me, for us in Walled Lake is the realization that it is possible and that we can do it, and we can do it with a degree of skillfulness and I think a degree of fidelity. Our teachers, like Dan mentioned, it was the whole community, parents coming together, the Teachers Association, vendors, district partnerships that we've had through the years. But at the end of the day, it was the teachers and it was the staff rolling up their sleeves and getting down to it. And I think that we realized that this is something that we could do, not only to just get by for a few weeks, which I think everyone originally was thinking, all right, this is just going to be a kind of a short term, a few weeks, we can do this. But as time went on and everyone's watching the news and we're looking at the data with the COVID numbers and what's happening, it became clear to us that schools were going to continue to be closed for the foreseeable future. And even now, as just listening to the news earlier today and seeing some of these hot spots throughout the country and the numbers starting to go up, and I think everyone understands and realizes that once September arrives and it's the start for the 20 to 21 school year, anything is possible. And whether we start with traditional schooling, virtual schooling, or a hybrid format, that we can do it. And our teachers are confident, and I think our parent community is confident. People have preferences, certainly, but we'll do what we need to do. But I think that the big takeaway is that it can be done.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would agree with Mark. I was, when this first happened, I thought, how in the world are we ever going to get this accomplished? And, pulling together, we were able to do it, with our staff, community partners, and companies across the city. But the one thing I think the takeaway that I learned is that there's a huge equity with broadband. Mm-hmm. And we really need to work on that. And, we're working with our city council, we're working with our state to see what we can do to address this. I mean, internet access should also, you have to have it. And so we're looking at it, it's almost like a utility. It's like turning on a light or turning on your water. Sure. It needs to be there. And until we figure that out, there's going to be a huge achievement gap, especially if we go to a virtual environment. So we're working really, really hard to establish that. What can we do as a community to make sure that we are equitable across the city, especially with internet connectivity? It's just, I was floored. I really was floored to see how many families did not have internet access, or to figure out, a lot of sad stories, and I won't get into a lot of the details, but, a lot of, families move a lot and they're transient, and how many homeless kids we had. And it was just an eye opener. So I think, to know your demographics, and we did, but, I learned a lot through that. But just the equity issue was a huge thing for me, and still is.
Yeah, that may be the biggest thing that comes out of all of this, right, is access to broadband technology, right?
For sure.
So we have a little bit of time left. I know districts everywhere are trying to determine how best to open in the fall. Could you each tell us a little bit about what you're discussing or considering for next year, classroom-wise?
Well, yeah. Oh, thanks, Dan. Like most districts, we have a committee of constituents, parents, local community leaders, administrators, teachers, from all departments, from our fine arts and PE to special services to all grade levels. We're meeting. We're looking at models that have come forward from other states or other districts. We're looking at the CDC guidelines. In the state of Michigan, our governor recently released back to school guidelines and parameters. So what works best for us with our needs and our current situation, trying to do the best we can with the information that we have and the resources that we currently have. And also just having an understanding that people have to be flexible. Anything could change. If we were to release a plan today, it would be in pencil, because between now and September 1, if anything, the last 3 months have told us to be prepared for change. And so we're just trying to dot the I's, cross the T's, keep kids' needs first, what is in the best interest of our students and our families, and then just try to work from there, and really having different scenarios. So when the time does come, then it's like calling in a play into a football game. We're ready to go. Yep.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, and like Mark said, I agree with a lot of what he said. We had a committee put together, constituents across the district, including some partners. The Return to Learn Task Force is what we're calling it. We've been meeting since April on what to do in the fall. So we determined that we have two modalities that we're looking at: the hybrid and the virtual, and giving families a choice. We're not forcing anybody to come back. Survey our stakeholders, see what they're most comfortable with, bring them back, and then try to determine, asking families to make a decision for a semester, like I said earlier, so we have something to move forward with. And working with our staff to see how many of them are going to be able to come back. We're going to have to realign. We are also working with the CDC's guidelines. We're working with the WHO guidelines. And what we had learned too with our Return to Learn Task Force, especially with the hybrid model, is that, we hear a lot about the safety of distance. You hear a lot about 6 feet. Well, the WHO has just recently come out with a meter. And so while we're looking at, we're, 3 feet versus 6 feet, I mean, that's a big difference. So we're looking in the middle at 4.5 feet. What does that look like? How many kids can we bring back? How many kids per classroom can we get back using those guidelines?
Right.
And so we determined that we could bring over 90% of our kids back using those guidelines.
Yeah.
And stop calling it social distancing and start calling it safe distancing.
Mm-hmm.
And we will, we'll keep the 6 feet in mind whenever we can, whenever that's possible. But I think we all know that keeping students, especially at the elementary level, 6 feet apart all day long, it's almost, it can't be done. But when you're looking at the 4.5 feet, that kind of changes things, and it gets a lot more kids back in the classroom. And we feel like it's really important to get as many kids back as we can, knowing that we're going to give a choice and kind of assuming or predicting that maybe 10% or more will choose the virtual environment. So that gives us a little more wiggle room too. But right now we're really pushing the hybrid model to get kids back in the classroom.
Yep, good. Well, it's such an interesting discussion and so much to talk about. We could talk all day about this stuff. I mean, it's such a huge, such a long road ahead of us, right? In terms of what's going to happen next. And I think, like you guys said, I think being fluid and being able to adapt to whatever the situation is the most important thing. So thanks so much for your, sort of candid comments and just talking to us about what you guys are doing. I think Chris said we're going to go over to you for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jason, Mark, and Dan. Some of these questions you guys have certainly hit on, but maybe you can just expand a little bit or wrap it up. Excuse me for just a second. I think this is for both Mark and Dan, this question here. Are there already attempts to use VR and or AR while virtual teaching and learning?
Good question.
Good question. Nothing formal in our district other than pockets of teachers starting to experiment with some virtual reality and some augmented reality type applications. That is one of the items our committee looked at, is if virtual learning is going to continue and be really part of our immediate future, then we need to harness all aspects of the technology and the emerging technologies, whether it be gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality. So at least for us, nothing formalized yet other than early discussions and putting that on our trajectory of this is kind of where we're leading to.
Yeah, the same in Des Moines. I mean, nothing formal. I mean, there's a little bit of that. We're dabbling a little bit in our virtual campus setting, but nothing for the rest of the district. But as we are offering more of a virtual environment as a choice, I'm sure that will be coming up. I mean, we've talked about it, but like Mark said, nothing formal yet. So yeah, more to come on that.
And again, for both of you, and you might have hit this already, what percentage of students were your school districts able to reach through remote learning?
So we're at about 90% in Walled Lake. Once we were able to distribute Chromebooks and connect, we did not do hotspots like they did in Des Moines. But what we did is we connected parents that did not have access to broadband to our local cable companies, our ISP providers, who were able to provide low-cost internet services. One of our providers offered free internet access for 90 days, and then it's $9.99 a month after that. The 10% that didn't have access, we made traditional packets of materials and provided a couple of options, whether parents picked those up from their school or we used US mail to mail them to them. But about 90% had access.
I would say the same with Des Moines, 80–90%. And again, we reached out to all our families via surveys to see what their needs were. And like Mark mentioned, we also created workbooks for each grade level and have them available at the meal sites to hand out to kids until they have the connectivity in place. And again, working with with MediaCom, our ISP in Des Moines, to get more of the connect to compete in our homes. But I would say probably 80 to 90%. We also established a call center for families. So we have and it's staffed all day long. So they can call not only with technical questions, technology questions, but anything, if they need any kind of information or any kind of assistance is needed for the family, they call that call center. And that has just been probably one of the best decisions we made. And we put that together overnight. And again, it's something we're going to keep. We're not going to get rid of it anytime soon. But I think that call center was really instrumental in making it successful.
Okay. Mark, for you, and we've hit on this, but I think this is a very, keeps coming in as questions. How do you suggest school districts accommodate full-time families remote learning?
Well, I think a couple of characteristics or attributes that you need to look at. One is tech support. Dan had indicated it. We realized this early on is in order for virtual remote learning to occur, families not only need to have access to the technology, but that technology needs to work. And when they're in school, we have our teachers, our tech support staff to be able to troubleshoot. But whether it's downloading an app or opening up a document or transferring some video or converting a file, you need to provide our parents, we needed to provide them access, whether it's a tech support line, a help desk, an email. But one of the things that we promised our parents is that we would always provide some tech support within 24 hours. Somebody would get back to them. So I think I would recommend to school districts to talk about that is how are you going to offer not only tech support to your teachers, but how do you provide tech supports to families and for students? And the other is take a look at the curriculum. Let the curriculum help drive. What is the learning? What are those learning targets? Start with the standards, those power standards. What does the data tell us? What is the most important sequence of standards of the unit that we want to be able our students to learn? If this were at the end of the first semester, what are those key takeaways that by the end of the first semester or the end of the first unit or card marking, what are the power standards that all kids should be able to master? And start with that.
Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think, as you're setting up for a virtual environment, I would advise to standardize on your tools as much as you can. I think that helps for support. You can't support everything, so just kind of limit that. And then to centralize on a learning management system. As Mark stated earlier, we had some teachers using different ones, and we standardized on one and moved everybody over. So I think that would help. And then centralize on a collaboration communication tool, either whether it be Zoom, Teams, one of those, so everybody's using the same platform. The more you standardize, the easier your support structure will be to create.
Agreed.
It looks like we have time for maybe one more here. For both of you, how did you approach business for partnerships during this time?
Well, we first started at the building level. In our district, we have 19 schools, 12 elementary, 4 middle, and 3 high schools. And right off the bat, all of our principals reached out to the local businesses, partnerships that they would traditionally use, along with their parent. We have in our district, we use PTAs, PTO, PTA. What would you traditionally do during the school year when you need resources? And just reach out to those business partnerships. Tap into the parents, like Dan mentioned earlier. Right off the bat, we had a number of parents who were emailing and say, hey, my company has this that we could offer, or if you need any of these, let me know. Whether it be carrying cases to put Chromebooks in, personal protection equipment. We had people volunteering to deliver Chromebooks, so parents wouldn't have to leave the house. And then at the district office, once we got into it, our community relations department just kind of organized all of that, leveraged our PTAs, our parent volunteers. But we really just started with the local principal who says, we said, your community, your parents, begin there. And it was, I think everyone can say that everyone I talked to across the state, through social networks, is that people really just came together. Everyone just seemed to chip in to help out.
Yeah, I would echo what Mark said too. The one thing in Des Moines that's been established years ago is every school is either adopted or sponsored by a company in the area. So they reached out to their partners and to see what ways they could assist. And a lot of times we didn't have to reach out. They reached out to us.
Yeah.
And our superintendent is very well networked too. So we worked through our board. Of course, MediaCom was our largest local provider for our ISP. So we reached out to them. And again, I don't think it really wasn't hard because most of them reached out to us, which was very nice. We had some of the vendors that we work with, like we lease all our devices. And right in the middle of this pandemic, when it hit, we were at the end of a lease cycle, and we were handing out devices, and we're supposed to be turning them back in and back and forth. And so that vendor actually stepped up and delayed payments for 90 days, and just things like that would really help the situation. But I think what really helped us is the established partnerships we already have with every building with their sponsored business in the district or in the city.
I think that's a great spot to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again, Jason, Mark, and Dan, for a very informative session. A lot of good information today. I'd also like to thank all the audience members for joining us today. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contain a link to the recording. And again, thanks for participating, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.